time. It's a long time. I enjoy it.
Kick off.
All right, I am so excited, I'm tingling.
Board Secretary, come on in, how are you?
How are you? One of these days I'll start wearing my suit.
Good,
So
how are you,
nice
guys?
to see you.
Good.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
You'd all please stand for pledge of allegiance.
Really good.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item is a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Seconded by Michael. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The next item is approval of minutes from the regular August 17, 2016 Board of Selectmen meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. And the meeting of August 26, 2016, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
One abstention,
You're still
Abstain.
late.
6. Okay,
I'll abstain also.
okay.
But you can.
4 votes yes, 3 abstentions. Under communications and correspondence, there is nothing for this evening. And then we'll move on to public comment. Shirley?
Shirley Olson, Russell Avenue. In reading the agenda, I have a question. In number 9, it says resolution to call a special town meeting and referendum vote. It makes me think that the vote for capital plan is going to be at that meeting, the way it's stated. Is it going to be?
Our agenda was established with assistance from Bruce Chudwick, and this is a requirement given state law and state statute, state statute and town charter, that we have a town meeting. The town meeting will not be a vote. It will be adjourned where the vote will occur at the referendum. Did you want to add to that, Bruce?
I can speak to it
Sure.
when we go to the resolution.
When we go to the resolution, we'll speak to it.
Okay, so the vote will be in November.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I still have a concern about the dividing up of the money. There are several absolute needs for the parks and recs, and $6 million is being dedicated to one park, the new park. And Michael Egalotti did bring out the fact that there are athletic fields and parks that are currently being used by our school children and by Parks and Rec and the community that are in need of repair. Last evening, Selectwoman Bransfield told me Carl has a plan. Well, both he and Mr. Dwyer have plans. A plan has an assessment, a plan, implementation, and evaluation. The assessment's been done, that these changes need to be done. There are plans in place. However, to implement the plan, you need the money. But I had no idea where this money was going to be coming from. If the $6 million is being bonded for the park out on Route 17. And lastly, I have a question for the board. Did Selectwoman Bransfield share with this board a formal complaint regarding the Egalati Fields, Middlesex Avenue, that there was a formal complaint regarding the condition of the property on the north side with the Chatham Health District.
That was a while ago. I don't really remember whether we told the board or not. I certainly know the Chatham Health District was aware of it, and the complaint was handled by them.
Yes, but did the board know that there was a complaint?
Well, you're asking the board, they can answer you.
Formal complaint regarding this property.
I don't believe I'm aware.
Yeah, I'm not aware.
Did the complaint come in a letter that you forwarded to us?
The complaint went to Chatham Health District.
So no.
Mrs. Bransfield was there when I asked how the resolution of my formal complaint was going to be resolved after Thad King was discharged from his position. This was at the January meeting of the Board of Health with the Chatham Health District. I mean, take it to the health department and it's not shared with the Board of Selectmen, and the Selectmen knows about it.
Thank you. The next item is there any other public comment? The next item is, I just wanted to point to you some certificates of congratulations. Some selectmen have asked that we share these with you when they go out. You may know that the Portland High School golf team, boys golf team, won the 2016 Division IV State Championship. And the last time the Portland High School team won the state championship was 30 years ago in 1986. And we point out that Joseph Santavener is the golf coach, Chris Serra is the athletic director, and the members of the team, the winning team, are John Lucas, James Kelly, Nick Pearsall, Andrew Tamaro, and John Twitchell. And I presented a certificate to them at a special dinner they had that was held at Quarry Ridge on the 22nd of August. So congratulations to Portland High School golf team. And we're also going to be presenting a certificate of congratulations to the Portland Little League, the All-Star Team Juniors, and the managers is Peter DeRing, and the coaches are Joseph Inglis and Gary Marino. And in July 2016, with the manager and the coaches, successful training, their guidance, and their encouragement, Portland and Old Saybrook Little League Juniors All-Star Team of 13 and 14-year-olds won the Connecticut District 9 Championship. The team went on to play in the state level tournament, where the team finished with a 3-1 record and advanced to the state final championship game. Their outstanding work performance, dedication, and service to the children of Portland is very much appreciated, and the members of the team are Brendan Albert, Jack Colella, Brian Dennis, Carter Ganji, Gabe Carr, Carson Megos, Joe Bradley, Grant Collins, Joshua DeRing, Alexander Inglis, Tobias Marino, and Nate Weeks. And that will be on the 15th of September. I believe it's going to be at the Senior Center. You're all welcome to attend. If you want any more information, I'll be happy to share it with you. I believe you should know by now, since we've been talking about the 175th anniversary, there is a parade on Saturday. If you plan to march with the rest of us, we will start gathering at about 8 o'clock, between 8 and 8:30, at the professional building on the corner of Victoria, right? Victoria and Main Street. And at the end of the parade, there's going to be some dedications, some awards that will be given out. You're invited to go to the reviewing stand, which is in front of the Brownstone Intermediate School. You will be asked to rank the floats, and there'll be prizes for the floats. That'll start at about 11 or thereabouts. We are planning to have some horses pull the Peterson wagon. The governor's foot guard, not the horses, but the foot guard will be in attendance. We hope that Lieutenant Governor Nancy Wyman is planning to attend. I know that Senator Blumenthal and Attorney General Jepsen are invited, and they're hoping to come. So we also will be celebrating at the 11 o'clock ceremony 20 years of Family Day. This is their 20th year. And we're also going to be handing out the awards for the various divisions of the parade. And we also, on behalf of some concerned citizens and the Exchange Club, as well as the town of Portland, we're going to be not fully dedicating a bronze plaque, but a citizen had approached the town and said there is no plaque in honor of the police department in town. There is for the fire department, there is for armed services, and we would like to present a plaque to our police department, and I'll read it to you. In memory and honor of those who have served and those who currently serve on the Portland Police Force. May you continue to be blessed for your bravery, wisdom, and compassion. Our community is grateful for the quality of life you help to preserve for our town. This is something that we're planning to put as a very simple plaque that'll be on a slab of brownstone in front of the Buck Foreman building. And this, it hasn't been ordered yet. If you had any comments on it, they're welcome. But this will be in the form of a simple plaque, framed certificate, I should say, to the police on Family Day. So I hope everybody is planning to attend. It should be quite an event. Some people have said there's probably going to be almost as many people in the parade as watching the parade. There's going to be a lot of people in the parade. So please come and enjoy. It should be a good day. All right. Now we'll move on to resolution recommending an appropriation and bond authorization of $10 million for a new public park on Route 17, reconstruction and repair of town roads and sidewalks, and miscellaneous capital expenditures. And I will highlight for you some of your handouts that you have tonight. Bruce Chudwick has brought with him the sample resolution after attending the meeting last night, and which was our public hearing. He has put together a resolution for your consideration. And we also have some financial information that David Eisenthal has brought to us, but I thought we would start with the resolution. Bruce.
Thank you, Madam First Selectwoman. Again, my name is Bruce Chudwick from Shippen and Goodwin. We have the pleasure of serving as bond counsel to the town and have drafted these resolutions for you for your consideration this evening. We've had several versions of these that have been moving around a little bit over time, over the last week or so, but the final version is based on what we heard last night and some other topics that we discussed with the Finance Director, Tom Robinson, and with the First Selectwoman today. So hopefully you have the draft dated today's date, September 7th, 2016, in front of you. But basically the way that we lay this out is in two resolutions, and what you have in front of you are a one-page resolution entitled the resolution recommending the appropriation bond authorization for $10 million. The next item on your agenda is the resolution to call the special town meeting and referendum vote. That puts everything in play and in place for the town meeting to come and the formal vote to come on November 8th. But the first resolution, as is required by your charter, the Board of Selectmen has to recommend or has to approve an expenditure and bond authorization such as this. So this is the way we frame it for you, is that you recommend the appropriation bond authorization for $10 million for a new public park on Route 17, reconstruction and repair of town roads and sidewalks, and miscellaneous capital expenditures. So there are three resolution resolved clauses in here. I'd like to walk through them with you. The first resolve clause provides that the Board of Selectmen recommends that the town of Portland appropriate $10 million for three things, A, B, and C. A is the construction of the new public park on Route 17, be used for passive and active recreation, and shall include but not be limited to recreational fields, playgrounds and playground equipment, a concession building, nature and fitness paths, a recreation barn, a splash pad, and a parking lot in the amount of $6 million, substantially as described in the opinion of probable cost report dated September 1st, 2016. That is the report that I believe was handed out to public hearing last night, and it was spoken to by the members of the committee. Is the September 1st, 2016 report. It has a total of $6 million, and David will maybe talk a little bit about our conversations with Tom Robinson today about that does not include costs of issuance for the bond issue, and so there has to be room made in that project for a certain portion of bond issuance costs that we'll talk about momentarily. But the list of items that are in there are all the items that are included, not all of them, but most of the primary items that are included in that report that was made last night at the public hearing. So it includes the recreation barn, the parking lot, some things that were at one time in other versions of the opinion of probable cost were not included are now back included in here because that was the final recommendation from last evening. So that's the park project. Item B, reconstruction, repair of various town roads and roadside elements, including related water and sewer infrastructure improvements in the amount of $2.5 million, and sidewalks, including sidewalks located adjacent to the town school facilities in the amount of $1 million. And then I added this this phrase as well, with specific roads and sidewalks to be determined by the Board of Selectmen. There's no set report as to what the $2.5 million will be spent for on the roads or the $1 million on the sidewalks. So what we did is we crafted this in terms of the Board of Selectmen will ultimately make that decision based on recommendations from town staff as to which roads you will do and which sidewalks you would do. So that's item B. And then finally, item C is miscellaneous capital expenditures for replacement of repairs to roofs, windows, condensing units, and furnaces in town buildings in the amount of $500,000. Those are the 4 items that were identified by the Board of Selectmen at this special meeting on Friday, August 26th. That constitute the $500,000 of the appropriation. So those are specific items that would be done as part of this overall project if it were approved. The project includes various things, including environmental remediation, site improvements, planning design, all the various types of costs that you would find in any type of building project, equipment and fixtures, temporary and permanent financing costs. The appropriation includes any federal, state, or other grants or other funds received for the project. So I want to make sure that that's clear, that if you receive a grant for any one of these projects, in order to spend that grant over and above the $10 million, you would have to go through, again, some sort of an appropriation process. Just because you get the grant doesn't mean you're authorized to expend it unless it's required under state law that from which you get the grant. So
Even if they're gifts?
well, if they're gifts, then yeah, I would say yes, because the way we look at it is any time that the first select woman or the town is signing a contract and therefore encumbering funds of the town, there has to be an appropriation in place to back that up. So now if it's a gift, then again, as I mentioned last night, it should be a very easy explanation at a town meeting to authorize that if a town meeting is even necessary. Otherwise, the board could do it on its own.
Thank you.
But you should always be making appropriations for expenditures of funds wherever the sources the funds is coming from. The amount authorized to be expended for each of the 3 projects may not exceed the amount set forth in this resolution. So $6 million, $2.5 million, $1 million, and $500,000. Provided that the Board of Selectmen may by resolution reduce or modify the scope of any one of the projects. And you also put language in here that allows you to transfer unexpended funds among projects as long as you don't exceed the $10 million. So that gives the board quite a bit of flexibility, I'm sure after a public comment and after reports from town staff on where the different projects may be, to move monies between the individual projects. So if the parks project comes in a little bit under budget, you could make a motion and second and resolve to move the money to the roads project as a Board of Selectmen. Okay, so that's the guts of the resolution. The second resolution is that the Board of Selectmen recommends that these projects be financed by issuing bonds, notes, other obligations in the amount of not to exceed $10 million. Again, if you have grants that come in, let's say you receive a $500,000 grant for a project, then the way this would require you to operate is that you would only bond $9.5 million. The grant coming in would be just reducing the town's net expense for the project, as opposed to going out and expending the other $500,000 unless you go through an approval process for the appropriation. And finally, that the Board of Selectmen hereby refers the project listed in item A, which is the new park, to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a report under Section 824 of the General Statutes. That is a provision that requires the planning commission of a town, as you guys probably well know, to review any major capital expenditure or new public project to be sure that it's in accordance with your plan of conservation and development. So that should be referred to P&Z after this evening's meeting if you approve this, and then they have a certain time frame, I think 35 days to act. If they should turn down the project, then it can be overridden by the legislative body of the town. I would think it'd be either Board of Selectmen or town meeting. If it's approved, then you're all set to go. But you cannot expend funds for these projects until, or at least for the park project, until you get a favorable 824 back from planning and zoning. So that's the first resolution to be considered. The second one's much more detailed, and I can talk a little bit about that in a moment, or go into that, or should we talk about issuance costs, Madam First Selectwoman?
Sure, why don't we talk about
Want to
the
do that?
issuance costs?
Dave, you want to? We've worked with David Eisenthal and Tom Robinson today on the cost of issuance for the bonds, and David has put some numbers together, and I'll turn the podium over to him.
Madam First Selectwoman, and members of the board. Understanding that the $10 million as a hard limit on spending, including cost of issuance and any potential capitalized interest on short-term borrowing, we made an estimate of what the amounts would be that would be needed for those costs of issuance and capitalized interest, and the gross number out of the $10 million is $225,000, which would leave $9,775,000 available for the three projects. You'll notice that we have numbers split by the purposes, and these numbers are not, they may appear to be not proportional. The reason for that is that we set those proportional to the financings. As you remember, we assumed a $5.1 million bond issue in October of 2017, a $3.4 million note issue in April of 2019, and a $4.7 million bond issue in April of 2020, each of which financed different proportions each of the of those three projects. And as a result of that, we arrive at a combined cost of issuance and capitalized interest for the park at approximately $146,000 out of the $6 million, leaving approximately $5,854,000 available for other project costs. On the roads and sidewalks, we calculated approximately $72,457, which leaves $3,427,543 available for the projects. And then for the other capital items, $6,000 for cost of issuance. And I would point out that this is because we assumed that that would all be financed in that first bond issue. There wouldn't be any need to allocate costs of the note issue or the second bond issue to the other purposes. These could, as the financing plans evolve, these numbers could change somewhat, although the gross number is not likely to change much, if at all, but the distribution as to between the three purposes could change. But this is to give an idea of what the amounts that ought to be left available for the payment of these expenses, which sometimes aren't thought of in the context of financing projects, and which are subject, as Bruce points out, to that those hard appropriation numbers.
Thank you.
So with that, I'll entertain any questions or comments on the first resolution. Would that be appropriate, or?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to the selectmen, you did receive an opinion of probable cost last night from the committee. I don't know if you brought that back with you tonight. I brought extra copies if you wanted to look at that.
It didn't change, right?
No, this is what you received last night.
Okay.
Yep. If you take a look at the bottom line, which is on, let's see, page 4, I believe, it's a total of $5,005,324 that's spent on the project. And then in the subtotal, there is a general conditions addition of 15%, which is $750,799. And then for permitting approvals and final design, you have 2%, which is $100,000. And then the Strickland Street improvements of $100,000. And the grand total, if you add all that together, is approximately $6 million. What's not included there is contingency. If you considered contingency of, say, 7.5%, that would be approximately, is that 375,000, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. And, let's see. You may need to look at a reduction in some of these accounts in order to meet that $6 million figure because of the necessity of having some contingency there. Some thoughts might be to consider, we had some testimony last night about asphalt and about the potential of that not being all paved. And if you went through these accounts, you can see that the asphalt would be a little less under the site improvements amenities. It's estimated to be $357,000. And if you looked at the potential of a couple of other things, that would take care of that contingency amount.
Now, when you're talking about asphalt, are you just referring to the parking and driveways, or are you also?
I think so, Ben.
Because there's another 88 in the path.
Yeah, in the back, and that may need to be included too.
Perhaps
Tom?
a silly question, does that have to be decided tonight?
I just wanted to bring your attention to that.
I assume it doesn't have to be decided tonight.
It would really depend on once the project gets bid,
Right.
and then you know what the numbers are.
So
I
can
just
see
wanted to
numbers
bring your
changing
attention.
all over the place, probably.
Yeah.
And we may get a favorable bid, so Brian may be right
True.
that
True.
this could be a moot point.
But I wanted in full disclosure to tell you that that number on this handout did not include contingency, and that there would be, I suppose, contingent items that could be removed. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that. Tom, were there other fees that you needed to speak to?
No, I just think that the main thing was just to state that you had a 5.9 million number with no contingency. Make sure you put in your contingency of at least 7.5%, which is under what the engineers had stated. And then you gotta get back down to 5.850, because there's issuance costs, in there to get you to 6 million. So, you need to get contingency as well as issuance costs out of that $6 million number. So that's gonna push that 5,021 number down. So
Again,
there's,
to give you a finer picture of potentials, which you don't know,
Just for edification,
Tom.
do these costs need to be prorated? That's what you're doing, right? The issuance costs among the projects, do they have to be, or they could be loaded one way or another?
I think they were done based on doing a bond issue and a note issue and a bond issue. The bond issue up front would be mostly for the park. So what the cost issuance for that bond issue were allocated to the park, so it wasn't just relatable, it was based on more actual allocation to
Okay.
what projects were financed.
Fair enough.
David, did you want to comment?
Well, and I'll just amplify that by saying that we allocated them If you look at this here and you look at the individual pieces of each of the three financings, the estimated issuance costs for each financing were then allocated pro rata to the constituent pieces. For example, on the $5.1 million bond issue, we're assuming that 2.1 of that will be for the recreation facility, $2.5 million for roads, and the $500,000 would entirely be financed in that first bond issue. And the estimated issuance costs for that issue were then allocated pro rata based on those proportions.
Do they have to be done that way?
I think that's bond counsel instructed that that is to be expected, and Mr.
They
Connell.
don't have to do, that's appropriate way of allocating. Generally, you do things on a pro rata basis.
Other questions on the resolution? Go back to the resolution that's presented.
You mentioned the 824. I just attended a planning and zoning meeting where I believe the chairman's under the impression that it's a referral only. It's not set in stone when it comes to 824 from planning and zoning. You mentioned there is no go without their blessing. Is that, where do you
Right,
stand?
it gets referred over to them. If they choose to take no action after 35 days, it's deemed to be approved.
Correct.
So they could just go ahead and just not do anything. If they do take it up, I mean, ideally, it would be nice to go to the town meeting in October with a statement that it's gone to planning and zoning and they've approved the park project. That would be helpful to know that they've looked at it. But they do have the ability to reject the project as not in accordance with the plan of C&D. And if they do that, then there has to be either an override or the project cannot go forward and some monies cannot be spent on the project until some resolution of that issue takes place.
Although that's not really true, right, because aren't we exempt from that?
Not from 8-24.
We're not.
And under the permitting and the fees.
It's in, but excuse me,
Yep.
Ben, I know that you have read the Plan Conservation Development Plan for the park. It's in the Plan Conservation Development, correct?
But that doesn't mean they'll vote in favor of it.
No, I'm just pointing out that it is already in the Plan Conservation. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
They voted down something that was in the Plan of Conservation and Development.
Okay,
They have the right to.
fair enough.
They actually just did it at the last meeting. Under permitting and fees, did you include, could you elaborate what that was? Whoever, I don't know. I saw there was $120-something thousand, but we're going to be exempt from town of Portland, correct? We are exempt.
I'm not sure, maybe someone from the committee could speak to that, the $100,000, yeah.
So, I think that,
Ju-
again, it's a percentage. You want me to-
Yeah, Ralph, would you mind? Thank you.
So it's like those other numbers. I mean, essentially, when they're doing the estimate, they're using a fixed number of 2% that they use to try to qualify. So it does include some final engineering work that was covered, and then permitting and fees. I don't think they've never given us specific information with regards to permitting and fees. I don't know, there might be you're going out to a lot of state departments and organizations. So I don't know if there's fees that come from that. Obviously, it's within the town. I would think that wouldn't be an issue, but we could certainly ask the question and get more information, but that's what we know at this point.
Thank you.
Fred, did you have any questions?
Yeah, are we on the resolution now? Is that what we-
Yes.
all right, that's on the first page, I'm just looking at.
You're on the one-page resolution, correct?
I'm on the very first page.
Yep.
The third line down, shall, and I'm just looking at that as being a little different in some of the other language, in that it's specifying, maybe in a little more detail, what should be done, and ultimately, as this project, if the project passes and moves forward, I imagine there's going to be some more discussion, there'll be some additional changes and efforts to try to save money. There's some discussion at the public hearing about that. But the shall include, but not limited. We're specifying, whereas I don't think we're doing that further on. Is there a disadvantage in being too specific? I guess that's my thought.
That's a very good question. I thought about that when I was drafting this because, and thought about changing that word to may, but I thought it's more appropriate to give the voters specificity as to what is intended to be in the plan, what's in the program. What are they going to get for that $6 million? Now, the stopgap to that, or the relief valve, is in the bottom part of the resolution that provides that the Board of Selectmen may reduce or modify the scope of any one of the projects. So add alternates would be appropriate, and then with Board of Selectmen approval, you could take pieces of those projects out. But when you say the word may, people may say, well, what am I really going to get? And the idea is that you shall get this unless the selectmen determine that it's not going to be able to be done, and they'll reduce the scope.
So the wiggle room is in the bottom.
Yes, exactly.
The
Yep.
other thing, while you're there, Bruce, I note on the opinion of probable cost that we received last night,
Mhm.
that we just talked about, it's dated September 6th.
Okay. We could make,
I think that there was a September 1, is that right? Ralph?
Probably- Yeah, I did. On the budget? Yeah, there was just, what happened was, when we made the changes, if you go down to, it was either the soccer or the baseball, the number wasn't, it wasn't auto add up, so the number was higher. So the numbers actually went down a little lower, so it was just one little minor change in the budget.
So the correct date is,
September 6th.
okay.
Yes, sir.
Nope, that's fine, thank you.
It actually just lowered the number just a bit, I know.
Okay. We'll make that change throughout the resolutions. Very good.
and you checked your cells and your math and all this?
Yeah, that's how I caught it.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Kitch, I didn't see you.
Question for you, Bruce.
Mhm.
Sure.
So if we're using the shall language in section A,
Mhm.
why would we not carry it through for B and C? I know that they're seemingly very non-specific compared to A, but why? So does the shall actually carry through to all of them? So the lead into each would be the shall?
I think maybe it was because of the lead-in for the parks was shall be used for passive and active recreation and shall include certain items. And those were, I think I drafted that way because there are specific items that I took out of the report.
Correct.
Whereas the other ones are broader in their scope, at least B is, it's the roads and sidewalk improvements. The other ones for miscellaneous capital expenditures, I think those are specific to those four types of projects. It just doesn't include the word shall.
So what was the rationale not to do the shall? Because based on conversation that have taken place here,
Mm-hmm.
it would appear that the four items that are listed were decided upon on the meeting on the 26th of August.
Mhm.
So you're leaving
And that's
that
what I'm
open to change as well?
Yes, and we talked a little bit about that last night, I think, at the meeting. As long as we're within again, we're talking about the difference between what was warned for the public hearing for last night and what changes you may want to make tonight. As long as they're not substantial changes in the numbers or the types of projects, then that would be allowable. But,
So you've
but
named
the word.
the
Mhm.
projects
Mhm.
in C,
Right.
but it's not a shall. So
I
to
think
me
it's just
that-
a,
That looks as specific as A to me.
mhm.
So help me with that.
Just not sure whether it's my poor grammar or as far as using shall. I think it's intended that each one of these shall.
Each is a shall?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think the wording.
And that will be the way it'll appear in print?
Yes.
All right. Then I have may I continue?
Sure.
Mhm.
Okay. I have another question. A few folks came up last evening and
Mhm.
asked, would there be separate questions? This is going to be one question,
Correct.
correct?
Yes.
So the conversations we had, and we know that you spoke about a potential for four questions.
Mhm, mhm.
In fact, we have one question.
That's the way this is proposed on your agenda, but I have prepared alternative resolutions.
Okay.
If you want to break it out into multiple questions, we can.
I just feel, and I know that most
Mhm.
people who came up here last evening said they
Mhm.
would prefer it to be one question. However, I think there was at least 3 people here last evening that went away from the meeting
Mhm.
thinking there were going to be 4 questions. So, you know, I feel badly that they're not here this evening, and if there any discussion that there is about that. And then I guess, and you probably know, I mean, I wasn't shy about saying that I felt that the call to the meeting on the 26th, the meeting that was called in 24 hours and 18 minutes prior to its being held, seemed to be very last minute. I could not make it. I had made it known the week before that I was not available for meetings that week, as did 2 other members of this body. So beyond setting the top of the limit, 4 other items under the absolutes were determined to be the projects that would be first addressed, or at least named, so that we could have discussion, hopefully so that we could have discussion. And, you know, I know when any of the select body or council members, depending on what body you belong to, don't come, then you lose your opportunity to vote on it. So I'm left here, and I need to say this because this is how I feel, and it would be disingenuous for me to not say this. I'm a person in favor of the park specifically, and mainly because of what I heard last night and what it will bring to this town with regard to hopefully increased property values, but what it will bring to this town with regard to opportunities for every level, every segment of our population to have a something that we don't have right now. I also look at this list of absolutes, and I know that I'm a realist. Maybe it comes with age, I don't know why. I look at this list of absolutes, and I'm worried that we're going to hit a point where we're not going to be able to afford to address them. So given my druthers, I would have been in favor of more than $10 million. Maybe that's not a popular thing to say, but I think that it's a sentence that needs to be stated because of what we look at here in absolutes. I also took to heart the statements made by our Long-Term Capital Improvement Commission and the effort that they have put forth to get information from department heads to outline this. And I don't think that people did a willy-nilly job. I think they spoke about what our needs are as a community. I guess I have a problem saying that we're going to have a 20-year bond for, and I'm just going to say the condensers. When the library director was here, she talked about that the condensers, and I'm not picking on the library, I use the library. She talked about the condensers at the library have a life expectancy. And so I wonder why that becomes part of a bond for 20 years. And I know that you're here to just counsel us on this, but I'm left in a position now where I think one portion of this looks really good. I think the rest of it omits needs that we have, absolute needs that we have. And I wish there were a way that we could address them. We're stuck now. A decision was made at a final hour. It's hard for me to fathom why it came about that way, because I think if you are in a position, you know that you generally have a good knowledge of the time frame for when these things have to be done. I think we missed that time frame. So I'm feeling like I'm stuck here between a rock and a hard place. And so the frosting on this bad cake was the fact that last night people asked, are there more questions? Can they be taken apart? Can each project stand on its own merits? And that was left relatively unanswered. It was not addressed specifically. As a matter of fact, folks left here last night, and I'm going to say it again, with an idea that there might be 4 different items to vote on, and that's not going to happen. That bothers me. I think it speaks to a lack of transparency, which comes back on us. I don't know how to fix it, but I'm not comfortable, and I need to say that, so.
There are other questions that are prepared that you can vote on.
Ultimately, it's up to this board
Right.
to frame the questions, whether it be one question, 4 questions, multiple
prepared.
questions, you could do whatever, it's up to
Right.
this board to do. And on the,
Would
one
you-
one thing I wanted to clarify too, on the condensers or other short-lived assets, you cannot borrow for 20 years for a piece of property that only lasts 3 years. You cannot do that on a tax exempt basis, so we, as bond counsel, would not allow that to take place. What we would do is you would finance that in the first 3 or 4 maturities of the bond issue, so you pay for it in a very short period of time. The long-lived assets you can do over 20 years, but the short-term, you generally can't,
But
so.
I guess
And that's-
my bigger concern is that that piece is going to bond. To me, that's a piece
Mhm,
that
okay,
should be
that's
addressed
prob-
on an ongoing basis.
Mhm.
And so I guess my comments are more about what we're doing with an infrastructure that we're getting over here. But I thank you, and I
Okay.
thank you for putting together other questions.
Okay.
Do you want to see them? Does the board want to look at multiple questions?
But
You brought them, didn't you,
Yeah,
Bruce?
in essence, what it does, it breaks just the 3 projects out, $6 million for the park is question number 1. Question number 2 is $3.5 million for roads and sidewalks. And question number 3 is $500,000 for miscellaneous capital projects.
Is it the same wording as here, A, B, and C?
Pretty much the same, yeah. Yep. The thing that gets a little tricky is that we then have 3 separate bond resolutions. They stand on their own or fall on their own. There's no ability to move money between the 2 of them. So if one project's over budget, you have to cut that project down, you can't move money to another project there to fill the gap. So they stand independently.
And I think
So
you
that's the-
mentioned that if it was $500,000, that's not a figure we would really bond. I mean, you mentioned that last night, that if people approved that, it may cost us $80,000 to have the whole bond process. Is that what someone said?
If that were the only question that were to pass, if they were broken out into
Yeah.
3, we'd probably work with the finance director to do a lease purchase agreement. We've built the ability to do that in here, so that you would do a normal lease purchase and not do a long-term bond just for that project. Is that a fair statement, Tom?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Kitch. I think what Kitch was referring to is there's a lot of needs that were not included in that meeting that we weren't that we weren't able to attend.
You know, there are other options that you have, and I need to
No,
say
no,
that to you,
well, hang
that
on.
you can not do this, and you can continue the discussion, and you could put out a different set of proposals, and you could vote on it at a later date. It's to try to get this on the November ballot. But you don't have to do that, and I don't want the board to feel they have to do that. The effort is to get the question on the November ballot. If you choose not to do that, that's certainly within your ability to do, and you could postpone and do a vote at a later date. I would like to put the question on the November ballot. It's something we've been working on, however, I'm just one vote, so that's up to this board.
I think the reality is the park people have worked hard. They
Yeah.
want it on the ballot. I want it on the ballot, but that's not what I was referring to earlier, and I believe Kitch was referring to, was we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, that there are so many other needs that we literally
Right.
have not sat here as a board and discussed and come to a sensible conclusion on what even the 1 to 3 needs are, the 1 to 3 year needs are. We haven't done that.
And what I'm saying is you can choose to not put that out if you
Well-
don't want to. And that's certainly within your right to do that. I don't want you to feel that you can't do that.
No, I mean, just to echo what Kit said, I did get a phone call while I was gone from Susan. I was told there wouldn't be a dollar amount put on it, and if there was a dollar amount put on it, we would be able to adjust it. So in other words, if 10 million was put on it, we would be able to go up to 15 if we thought the needs existed from all of these reports we received.
And you can
Um,
proceed to do that. As again, you don't have to put it on the November ballot. I
No,
don't
no, no,
want you
no,
to feel you have
but
to.
using that information, can we do that in this meeting? Can we talk about other needs?
That's a good
And
question.
and decide whether they need to be added or not? That's where I'm at. I'm not trying to kill a park. I like the park. It's not about that, but I do recognize, and it would be short-sighted for me or anybody else up here, I'll say it, to not at least acknowledge there are a lot of other big issues that we need to be talking about. You know, there's handicap issues, there's ADA issues, there's a ton of things. I don't
Where
know.
are the ADA issues?
If you look at one of the ball, I think Agalotti Field, if you pull up Agalotti Field ADA.
I thought you meant on buildings, okay.
Oh, no, I'm referring to the capital long-range
Okay.
improvement report we have. There's a lot of things on here that I truly believe we should be discussing, picking a dollar amount that we are comfortable with, not, I mean, that
And you
500.
can.
But,
And you can. Absolutely.
so we
you
can, well, let me, because in the
Well,
last meeting,
You can
nobody
talk
could answer
about
me.
it.
Can we go above the 10 million? I guess that's my question.
Not substantially, no, because, again, you warned a public hearing for $10 million of project. If you'd like to do that, then you need to warn another public hearing and start the process over again.
And tomorrow's the date for this.
And so,
Right. No,
so
no,
we'll make
I
the November
recognize
ballot.
that.
That's,
So
which
back
is,
to-
which
back
is
to kitchen-
what you have the ability to do.
Rock and hard place.
It's not-
It's, okay.
I have, you done?
Sure.
When were you aware of this time frame, and how did we get backed into this corner is where I'm at? Could you walk me backwards through this? Here we are at the 11th hour, making very, very big decisions for the town of Portland's, arguably one to
if I-
5 years.
if
When
I could-
were you made aware of this time frame, or how did we get here? I guess that's my question.
If I could. On July 20th, the park came and they gave us a question for us to consider, and the board wasn't ready for that. They wanted more information. And there was a date set for August 23rd for the long-range capital to meet. No one could, a majority could not meet that date, so this board made it August 30th, knowing that the question had to be ready by September 7th, which is today. In preparation for that question, I contacted bond counsel and said, hey, I need some help here. I don't do this every year. I don't make up questions for bond. I need some help. And I called Bruce Chudwick, who's our bond counsel, and he said, I will get back to you in the middle of next week, which he did. And he said, you need to have a public hearing if you wish to put this on the November ballot. If you don't want to put it on the November ballot, you can hold a public hearing, or you can have further discussion and then a further public hearing. I said, I've been directed by this board that they want to put, that you told the park committee that you definitely wanted to put it on the November ballot. So I said, we have to get this done right away. And he, Bruce, was very helpful in telling me that this public hearing had to be held. I didn't know a public hearing had to be held. I didn't know that this board knew that. And I did know we were close to the date, and I think every board member knows we were close to the date. In fact, some of the information that I got on the roads and sidewalk information was being worked on, but I didn't receive it until late August.
So we had to have the meeting that Friday, we couldn't have had it the following Monday.
You
when three were available.
wouldn't have been able then to have the proper notice for the meeting. But again, I don't want you to feel that you have to put a question on the ballot
No,
in
that makes
November.
me feel a lot better. It had to be that Friday, so Monday would not have worked timeframe-wise.
I will tell you that in order to get the deadline in the Hartford Courant and the Middletown Press for Tuesday, let me think about this for a minute. For a Friday paper, I think is 24 hours before. But if you want to get it in Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I believe it has to be in by Friday noon. And if you want it in Tuesday, then you can get it in Monday noon. So the Monday paper would be very difficult to do. And in order to have the call, as Bruce explained to me, you need to have a call of the public hearing. And honestly, I didn't have enough time to think all that through without speaking with our counsel, so he did give me that information. So that's why we had to get it out. Now, again, repeat myself for the third time, if you don't want to put a question out there, you don't have to. It's to get a question on the ballot. And to Kitch's point, if you want to divide it into separate questions, I've asked Bruce to prepare those questions so that you can review those tonight, and you can choose to put the questions separate.
You know, I'm loath to separate them. I think, you know, I think there's a groundswell for the park, and that's great. I don't feel like we vetted the rest of them in a
Right.
thorough manner.
I have a question on that, though, for Bruce, if I could interrupt you for a
Okay.
minute. If there was to be additional review of the other aspects, and another referendum was held, is there anything that would preclude the town's issuance, even though one question might be in November, and the vetting of the other matters would be at another time, and a referendum would be held later? Is there anything that precludes the ability to then bond those together? You know what I'm saying? So you have one referendum on
You want to
the,
combine them together so you reduce the issuance costs?
yeah, thank you. I know one risk you run, Kitch, is that when you put out let's say theoretically, you put out just the park question in November, you feel that's a ready question. and
I do.
agree with you. You get probably 80% turnout, we hope, presidential election. You take the time between now and, I don't know, name a month. Maybe you want to put it out in February, maybe you want to put it out in March. You vet all of the other items. You look at sidewalks, you look in more depth at the roads, you look in more depth at some of the other requirements in some of the other parks, and you put a question out there. If it's a special referendum, you have to have 20% turnout in order for it to be approved. But if you push, you can get 20% turnout. And then when you get ready for issuance, you could combine them and save on costs in that way. That's the question on the table.
Depending on how much time difference there is, that can be done. And one thing we build into the resolutions is that, let's say the park were approved on November 8th and you weren't going to do the next ones until February or March of next year. You can advance monies from other sources to get the park project going, and then issue bonds and reimburse yourself. So you can advance monies from your general fund to do that. And then when you do the bonds, after the other projects are approved, you can reimburse what you've paid out in advance of that. So you can do that as well.
So Susan, can you speak to me historically about turnout in the non-residential?
We don't do a lot of them, I will tell you that. We don't issue bonds very often, obviously. I think that's obvious from tonight's conversation. You really have to push to get out 20%. We did do, and this goes way back, I was not for Selectmen. I believe I was on the Board of Selectmen, and we needed to repair the roof at the Portland High School, the old high school. And what we did was put out a special referendum, and it passed by majority, but it didn't get the 20%.
So failed.
It failed. And what we did was we waited till the November election, and we put it on the next November election. So, you know, you also put out your budget every year, your
Right.
referendum. You could theoretically put out a question on vetted matters not associated with the park. Give yourself the time and feel comfortable with it before you put it out there. There's nothing that legally, I'm looking at our attorney here, that if this board doesn't feel they want to put out the other parts of this question, they don't have to. If you're not ready for it.
So then, I guess what we look at is, you know, of these absolute needs, what are the highest priority? And I would hope that when the group of five met, that they outlined the needs most pressing of the absolute needs. Could be yes or no. I don't know. And I don't know what discussion transpired in that meeting. For me, I would have a different comfort level if I thought that we could vet where we're going to be a little more.
I understand
I
that.
feel badly that that the $10 million ceiling was set, and then after that, we had our meeting with long-term capital. I felt like, we did this
But as I said,
backwards.
if you're not comfortable with the decision, you can make the decision on the park, whatever the board wants, and then the
I
other
have
question
a
could be
comment I would
that.
like to make too, if I could.
I'm sorry?
I have a comment
Okay,
I'd
go
like
ahead,
to,
Fran.
everybody's jumping in here.
Sure.
No, speaking to that, this issue, getting back to the issue of one question versus splitting. As I listened to the public hearing last night, maybe the preponderance, in my mind at least, of the opinion of the public was one question, put everything on one question. And that's how I thought
agree.
that pretty strongly felt that way. And, and I kind of thought that was probably settled, but now, it's kind of back again. As far as the capital, the cost, yeah, there were needs back, if we just went back 3 or 4 months, all those needs that now are out there were there then, and we didn't talk about them. I don't think we can address them all in the short term anyway. I think they have to be looked at, and I think some of them have to be, on that list of capital items, there's a sub-priority list. There's maybe a few things that have to be done. There is a mechanism that we were talking about at the beginning of the year to address those, and I think we do have to look at it. I agree with you. There are a lot of problems. A lot of things have to be looked at. But we've come this far with this. We have a cap on it. We know what we're going to spend. It's not making everybody happy, that's for sure. But I'm inclined to want to move forward and get it done with one question.
Like to say something as well. During the meeting, I know some of you weren't at that meeting, but Brian, myself, and those that were there, we did take a look at the different requests from long-term, and I think we prioritized the things that absolutely had to be included in there. I think we vetted to a pretty significant degree the things that were in there. Now, it would have been better had you been there as well. I think that would have added to it, but I feel comfortable with the things that we did choose. I also felt comfortable with the $10 million number based on not only the cost, what it would add for taxes or whatnot, but also based on feedback I'd gotten from residents in town in terms of what number should we invest in the town and the whole bit. So I came to that number and felt pretty comfortable with that. I felt pretty comfortable with the allocation of money. I know, being on the sidewalk committee newly, the $1 million toward the sidewalks and having something started there, I thought was a very big priority based on us having talked about it for a long time. But just so you guys know, I just feel comfortable with what we had decided and how we had looked at that list of priorities. Now, we could certainly add to that. I don't know, we may want to consider maybe an additional bond or something down the road after we've got some additional things as well, but I certainly feel comfortable with this for another reason, in that I love the idea of a park that's lifestyle, that's a place we can get together, the presentations that were done and the work that was done for that park. Everyone knows that that was put together in a way that, I want to see that happen. But also infrastructure is important, and I just think it sends a good message from this board that, that we're investing in the town on both sides, on the roads and the other things that need to get done, on also lifestyle, and that just makes Portland, again, a great town to be in. So having both go on the referendum question for this November, I think, sends the right message as well. We're never going to have it perfect. There's always going to be something that we could have spent money on, or something may happen. But I do like the idea of going forward with this. And then we always have the option to add things or do other things, or look at other ways of getting capital for other projects that may come up as well. So.
I think I'm probably in the minority. I was vacillating back and forth between one question up to possibly as many as 4 questions. And I'm satisfied with having one question, mostly based on the fact that that was what the majority of people who appeared last night wanted to do. Even people who were suggesting just having separate questions. I did speak to two people last night who didn't feel very strongly about it either. So I do think that the majority of people do want to have one question. I did attend that meeting on Friday, I guess it was the 26th. I think if all 7 of us were there on that day, that we probably would have come up with the same thing that's before us today, based on the information that we had at that time. The number for the park kind of speaks for itself. The $500,000, the reason why I believe we came up with that number is because that was the only number for those 4 items. Those were bondable type items for the most part, where other things were not, or they had not been vetted at all. I think we had heard about Gildersleeve School at that point. At one point it was 500, it jumped to $1.5 million, and that was news to me on that Friday, so certainly I wasn't going to be considering that at that point. The sidewalks and the roads, I think I feel a little differently about that. We put $1 million toward the sidewalks. I think that's something that has to be addressed at some point. As far as the roads, I think we were talking about 2 particular roads at that time. And I personally think it's premature to be dealing with those roads at this point, but you know, they're there. So that was my thinking. That's where I am on this. And I think we should just go forward with it. And I guess I would agree with everyone that we certainly need to spend some time vetting these issues and really investigating what really needs to be done and having a plan in effect, which is what we talked about, I think, 2 weeks ago.
Anyone else?
I was not at that meeting on Friday, so I wish I had been there. I maybe would understand a little more, but from what we heard last night and last week, I guess it was, from Long Range Capital, I feel that many people felt they were rushed, not the park. The park's a whole separate issue, that's fine. But I think that the directors in the town felt, according to Michael Aguilotti, that they were rushed in coming up with the numbers that they came up with. And I would have said originally that I thought 10 million would have been enough money, but broken down the way it is, I actually feel there should be more money in the infrastructure for the town of Portland. I think $2.5 million can't do a lot of work with $2.5 million. But all that being said, I feel that we probably should go forward with the one question now, because we do want to at least get this passed by the people. We want this park, and we do need some money. Hopefully we can get money other places or have rental agreements for some things that we need for some equipment. But we knew all about all these things for a long time, and it's ironic that now all of a sudden we feel rushed with it, that's all. But I agree with the one question.
I guess I'll just, start by, past few mornings I've driven by Gildersleeve School. There isn't a spare parking spot in the school.
There's what? I'm sorry?
There's not one empty spot in the parking lot. They're actually now parking up on the side. It's going to be something that needs to be addressed, and they're saying that's $1.5 million. You go through things like the breathing apparatus is 15 years old. It's $350,000. We're going to have to deal with that. I just want everybody to be aware of these are facts. We're changing the communications on the tower, and I think a grand total of might have been 175 or it might be 200, 150 for the Portland PD and 50 for the fire department, so 200,000 there. These are things that aren't going to go away and are going to need to be done, and everybody should be fully aware of it. Had I been at that meeting, I would have, and I'm surprised, and this would be another way to look at it, I'm surprised you didn't recommend, Bruce, a higher number, because you can always go down. The reality is, when you're presenting this, you can always go down. You can't go up. So I think at that meeting, had I been there, I would have said, well, we've heard this number of 18 million worth of needs being thrown around. That number should be where you start, because you can always work backwards from there. That, to me, that makes the most sense. So, Brian, I disagree with you on that when you say I would have walked out of there.
They're unpredictable, I can't.
Right, yeah, no, I'm just, my point is, I agree with you, and my point would have been, I would have never backed myself into a corner at that meeting. I would have put it at a higher number, and then knowing the final report was gonna be coming, showing us what our absolute needs were, and I could work from there. So you would, in my opinion, you would set the number higher and work your way backwards. That's not what happened, so obviously, we're in a predicament. I find it almost amusing, some of the ones that are included and some of the ones that aren't. The serious things to me are obviously the fire department oxygen tanks, things like that. You can't even ignore them. I would much rather see a reduction somewhere else and have that included because it's going to have to be replaced. But I don't know if I even have that ability. Big picture, I like the park. I'm not sitting up here bashing the park. I am a little surprised using the numbers that you guys created. I believe it was, there's about 350,000 above, and I asked this question in the last meeting that I attended. The park started off at $5.5 million, and that's what it was presented all along. And then I asked Tom, how did we get to $6 million in the last meeting, and last meeting that I attended, not the last meeting. And he mentioned the issuance and the capital interest costs, and in this case, that's only 145, so that would put us at approximately 5.65 million. So we padded an extra 350 just for the heck of it from that original number. Is that how I'm reading it?
That's not true.
Yeah.
And that previous meeting, what I explained to you is that the report that was presented, made no fault of anyone by the Park Commission, was what they considered construction cost. In that, 15% for general construction was missing, 10% for contingency was missing, 2% for for permitting was missing. Those were things that I was unaware of when I came up with the 600 number. I did not have that document.
You mean the 6 million?
That means that the $6.6 million is a total, 6.7 million is the total project cost. There's been subsequent revisions with the commission. They've worked down to this new number, which earlier I was saying to you all, even though with that, there still is no contingency in the number. So if they estimated a 7.5% contingency, they're still gonna have to get themselves down around the $400,000 number from where they are, 450,000. So they have a decent number. It's just that there was, the contingency was never factored in, and at the time, the construction management wasn't. And now there's been some movement where construction management is included, but contingency was not. So that was where, on that report that's been drafted out there, I was saying that the engineers said 10% contingency. I just brought up out of 0.5%, 7.5. Someone could use that, and then also the construction costs. So those are things, and that's where, earlier on, they said they would work through what they would delete later on.
So from our previous meeting, all of in the original one, it was excluded, optional, probable costs, all of those are now included?
No, what was missing was construction management.
No, you keep saying, hang on one second.
One at
You
a
keep
time.
saying things that were missing. You're mentioning just one thing that was missing. Obviously, in order to have a park, you needed to have, I would argue, soccer goals. And that was originally in the last meeting an add-on. Is that now included in the park? I'm trying to just figure out, are we presenting a real number? Do we have it?
Which last meeting, I'm sorry, just for
The
clarification?
last meeting that I attended,
Which one is that?
2 meetings ago. Yeah. Either way, I have the paper in front of me that shows what was originally not part of it. So is everything included in the new number is what I'm getting at? Or are we still presenting something that
We
is
did,
incomplete?
the one that we're talking about tonight, the September 6th, was talked about last night at the public hearing. It was handed out. You did not get that last night. You were not here. at
I
the
have that
public
here,
hearing.
and then I also.
You've got it
I have-
tonight,
I also have
right?
the original one.
Okay.
And that's what I'm comparing to. So my
Okay, and your question,
and it
you wanna
may be to-
rephrase it
it's
for
probably-
us,
I-
please?
I think it's gonna go to Ralph. Ralph, the question would be, are all the things that were on the excluded On the original one, are they now included?
All right, so let me give you an explanation that I gave yesterday. So, on the original statement of estimate that we had, there were the three items at the end. And we consciously left out contingency and consciously left out general consideration because we did not fully understand the nature of that grouping, of what that represented. And the permitting and fees, now the number came to 5.2. Permitting and fees and engineering came to, it was 100 to make it 5.3. And we figured the 200,000 that was left over was certainly enough to cover this issue with a Strickland entrance. So that brought us still to the 5.5, but obviously we were missing contingency and we were missing the general consideration. So what happened is, when the number, that Tom brought up was 6 million and talked about, well, how could you leave those things out? We actually got on the phone with the engineer last week, and that's how we arrived at this change, was that we got on with the engineer, gave a little better explanation of what general consideration meant. We went through the list of all the items that were on our estimate. We tried to remove some things we thought we could get away with removing without taking away from the integrity of the overall plan for the park. And we eliminated those, dropping it just under 300,000. So that's where you arrived. And then what we did is we put the general consideration back in because we obviously came to understand it was probably a critical estimate to throw in there. And so that's where you arrived at that 5.9 number. So that now includes that. We still obviously do not have a contingency. We know that that's a risk and we have to understand that we're going to have to get creative on that. But let's face it, we didn't even put this to bid yet. 10% gets you your 500,000. If it's 10% down, so it floats all over the place.
Right, and
So we knew that contingency meant we were going to have to come up with some sort of a strategy in order to make that up, and we talked about things that we could further eliminate if we had to in the plan, or we've talked to, obviously, we can't do much with grants. We have 10 pages of grants listed, but until you actually have something approved, you can't attack them. So we're kind of sitting there with a strategy. If we are 500 short, what do we have to do? And that's where the number. So I explained that yesterday, so that's really how they evolved.
Just so I have a better handle on this, on the last page of the newest one dated September 16, the last page shows trash receptacles, 30 of them at 1,100 apiece, which comes out to 22,000, which is incorrect. But back to the first page, it shows site furnishings, trash receptacles, and you've downed it to, I'm imagining you downed it to 10 just to make this project work.
Yes,
That
we
number
talked
is-
about that was probably excessive, and we
Right.
could reduce
And
that.
it talks about, there you have 11 of them in the budget, you have 10 of them in the budget at 11,000. So on the additional, so that's something that we just wouldn't need. I'm trying to get a handle on what are we missing out of this park? At the end of the day, if we're building a nice park, let's make sure we have everything. Let's not be missing major components of this project. So the trash receptacle, I probably answered myself. You have 11 of them in it, and that's sufficient for the project?
We felt that that was a comfortable number.
Okay, so then on...
I mean, we actually talked about whether we should reduce even more, but we thought that was a comfortable
Right.
number.
Well, and I would hope we could get them done for less than 1,100.
Well, again, those were the design,
Right.
there was a design, amazing as it was, there was a design to them, and that's what they presented. We
Right.
certainly
We-
talked about those
We could
cheaper
probably save a little
solutions.
of that, but I just want to, back to the big picture, I want to make sure if we're doing this, we're doing it right. So do we still have additions and add-ons that are not included in the budget, or all of these on the last page not included? Like the scoreboard, for example? I'm trying to get a handle on...
So just to understand with the scoreboards, we had that conversation, and we arrived at the fact that we originally had like a scoreboard at every field, and we said, you know what we're going to do is we're going to make one field for each sport be a premier type field, a little higher grade. So we left the scoreboard on, and we eliminated the other two scoreboards. We eliminated some fencing around the soccer fields that we originally had. We've already talked about whether we'd even eliminate more if we have to. So those are discussions. I mean, we went through pretty much all the items on the list and talked about them. I mean, there are some things that we've had conversations with the sports clubs about them, for potentially contributing, some funds to help out with adding some of the things. And that's what we've had the conversation with.
And hopefully it comes under, the bids come in favorable and there is extra money, but if I'm reading this the right way, are the soccer goals not even in the park as of now?
I'm trying to remember what we
And
talked
I'll
about.
gladly give you the copy. I'm just trying to, because obviously if we're building soccer fields, I think we need to budget for the goals.
Right now, currently, the soccer fines are on goals anyway. And then when we met 2 years ago, to get the number down, soccer at that point said that, they can take on, and literally the same way, some of the different things that aren't big, major ticket items. And right now, soccer is actually the last few years, they have bought all those.
Okay.
So,
Now-
that's something that they had taken out and taken out.
So, yeah, there's a list of some items that we had previous conversations with the leagues, the clubs about ponying up to cover.
Probably about 2 years old when that happened. I would say that was, just looking at it. Yeah, that was in the last committee.
How about the bleachers for the people watching and the players' bleachers?
So we talked about that, and ultimately we said that that's not necessarily things that we see at other fields. I mean, we talked about, I've been to soccer games for many years, and we rarely see, unless you're at a high school, you don't really see bleachers, so we didn't think that was a required
Okay.
element.
And that's obviously a way to save money. And then how about the single and double chain link? You felt we don't need them?
So again, we talked about, one of the things we originally had, they did have fencing around the entire soccer fields. We talked about it, didn't make sense. Ultimately, we want to make sure it's on the side where we're concerned about a vehicle trying to get onto the field, and we'll probably look at it from that strategy. So we did eliminate a good amount of the fencing because it's overkill. I mean, we rarely go to fields that have actually fencing around them. So we certainly have to worry about the strategy of protecting the fields.
Yep.
But putting a fence directly around it may not be the most needed way of attacking that strategy.
So that's a tough maintenance thing too, so now the guys will have to trim all the way around the fence.
Yeah. Boulders are cheaper and easier to maintain. But, so basically, you could save me a whole lot of time. You're not worried about everything on the last page at all? Is that safe to say we can, the site will function properly without those items?
Obviously, we're concerned from the standpoint, the bid came in really high, and now we got to really scramble, of course. But from the standpoint of what we've estimated on this, I think we felt comfortable. Again, we had those conversations, because a few times we were looking at pulling things, and I'm like, I think that's going to really, it's going to take away from what we've told the public, what we're bringing to them. And so we backed off, looked at other things, and removed those to cover it, so we didn't take away from the integrity of the items we were trying to put in there.
Thank you.
Susan, may I ask?
Sure.
Ralph, the barn that Carla referred to last evening as a potential for, Sean, maybe you know the answer to this, the barn for summer programming. So from the video that we saw last night, there's a reduction of 100 square feet. So that the visuals that we had said an 800 square foot barn. The paper we have now says 700 square feet.
That might be just a discrepancy, right? I don't think,
So
Yeah.
I just was wondering, what
It was, yeah,
difference
we-
does that make for how many children could, or how many
Yeah.
programs could be held? So what-
we'll have
what
to
is
look
it?
at that. If that's a discrepancy, it's just was missed, because we pretty much talked about a design size, and we'll have to
Okay.
just figure out if it's the 700 or the 800
It's
square
the
feet.
The 7.
Okay.
The visual
Well,
had 8.
okay. That's just an oversight, I don't
Okay,
know.
thanks.
I did have, while you're thinking about your next comment or question, I did get an email. I had said to the group last night that if there was anything further that people wanted to say, they could, from Joseph Inglis, 207 East Cotton Hill Road. And he says, I did want to provide you and the Board of Selectmen with my view on the one question or multiple questions. Earlier this year, I joined the Route 17 Project Committee, and we were charged with educating the citizens of Portland on the need for a park and ultimately construct the question that would be placed on the November ballot. I think our committee has done a great job educating the citizens of the town on what is included in the park, benefits of the park, costs of the park, and the impact on taxes. We have also constructed the ballot question as requested. I'm urging the Board of Selectmen to keep with the original plan and let the park question stand on its own merits. This will allow the voters to decide how funds should be allocated. In my opinion, it would be unfair to ask voters to approve an amount that's nearly twice as much as they've been told all year due to the addition of other capital items that surfaced late in the process. So I just wanted to give you that additional. Thank you, Joseph.
Move for adoption of the resolution as drafted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Michael. Further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We will need a drafted resolution from you on that particular one, and now we're going to move on to the next one. I almost thought we were finished, but we're not.
No, right.
We're moving on next to, let's see, on our agenda, resolution to call a special town meeting and referendum vote, and Bruce will explain to us why we need to do that.
Okay. The next resolution is it encapsulates all the processes for what will happen next. You've now made a recommendation and approved the projects in one question, and the next resolution reads as follows. The first whereas clause is just a summary of what you just did. You recommended the projects stay together in one item of $10 million. The next thing, the next resolve clause, be resolved that the attached detailed appropriation and bonding resolution for the projects is hereby approved. That is the pages of legalese that I need in order to give a bond council opinion when you issue the debt for the projects. That's sections 1 through 6, and we'll go over that. But that is the resolution that will be presented to the special town meeting for their consideration and discussion, not for a vote. The vote will only take place on November 8th. But that's the detailed resolution that needs to be provided. And what it does, I don't want to jump ahead to that. Let me just go through the rest of it. We'll talk about that detailed resolution in a moment. So that resolution is approved and is going to be sent to a special town meeting on Wednesday, October 26, 2016, in accordance with the attached warning of special town meeting, which is also hereby approved. That is the last 2 pages of your resolution, which is the warning. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then a copy of the full text of the resolution is available for public inspection in the town clerk's office. So the way the process works, that we read it underneath your charter, not only did you need a public hearing, you need the Board of Selectmen to make a recommendation or approve the project. It goes to a special town meeting. The special town meeting is to be held somewhere between 7 and 14 days before the November 8th election. That is provided by Section 7-7 of the general statutes, which allows a Board of Selectmen to remove a vote from a town meeting call and send it to a referendum. And your charter clearly says that you have the powers of the general statutes as well as what's in your charter. So, and just by way of background, when you approved the 2 water projects back in 2008, the water tank and water lines, you had a town meeting on October 24th, I believe, in advance of a November 4th referendum vote that approved both of those projects. So we're being consistent with what's been done in recent history. And I think that's the way it should work. So the special town meeting will be held on Wednesday, October 26, 2016, in accordance with the warning that we'll talk about in a moment. Further resolved that pursuant to the general statutes and as required by Section 1204 of the Charter, the Board of Selectmen hereby submits the resolution to a referendum vote on the voting tabulators or paper ballot in accordance with the general election that will take place on Tuesday, November 8th, 2016, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Finally, further resolved that the resolution shall be placed upon the voting tabulators of the paper ballot under the following heading. Here's the question that will show up on the ballot. Shall the town of Portland appropriate $10 million for the construction of a new public park located on Route 17, reconstruction and repair of town roads and sidewalks, and miscellaneous capital expenditures, and finance the appropriation by issuing the town's bonds, notes, and other obligations in an amount not to exceed $10 million. People that support or approve the resolution will vote yes. Those opposing it will vote no. Voters qualified to vote who are not electors, so property owners in town that are not citizens or residents of the town of Portland, will vote at the Portland Middle School, 93 High Street in Portland, Connecticut, in accordance with the procedures in 9-369D of the general statutes which you choose to apply, and that's language right out of the statute. Absentee ballots, of course, will be available from the town clerk's office. The final resolution is what we talked with the first selectman woman about this afternoon, and this provides that you may prepare what's called an explanatory text and other explanatory materials on this question. After tonight, once you approve the question, the town cannot spend town funds to try and promote or oppose any project. That is against the law. And someone could file a complaint with the State Election Enforcement Commission against whoever is responsible for that, and there is personal liability for people that violate that statutory provision, and that's been upheld in the past. So the one exception to that in the statute is that if the legislative body approves an explanatory text that is unbiased, it is absolutely neutral. And when I say neutral, it is thoroughly scrubbed to make sure there's no inkling of any ability to try and support the project. Anything like the word need in an explanatory text is found to be a violation of the statute. So this authorizes you to do that and to spend town money to get information out to your voters, as long as you do it in a neutral fashion in accordance with 9-369B of the general statutes. So that's also part of this resolution that would allow you to do that. We've talked about how that can be done, and again, this is required under the statute to be prepared by the town clerk and reviewed by the municipal attorney, by the town attorney, but we usually look at that as well for review. There are some towns actually send it to the State Election Enforcement Commission and get signed off by them before it goes out, which then you're fine. That's pretty rare, but that could be done possibly. So once the information is prepared, then it can be distributed in however you see fit. You can just make it available for the public at the library, at town hall, and other public places. You could do a town-wide mailing of whatever the explanatory text would be, and you can spend town funds to do that as long as it's neutral. So this gives you the ability to do that, so you can get information out to folks between now and the town meeting in October and the vote on November 8th. So that's the resolution. So what this resolution, those 2 pages, bring all the detailed bond resolution in, which is sections 1 through 6 of those next pages. And again, that's just more detail of how the projects, or how the bonds are to be issued under your charter. The first selectman, deputy first selectman, or director of finance, only 2 of them are authorized to issue bonds and notes for the town. So we track that language in sections 2 and 3. In section 4, we have information regarding complying with the IRS Treasury regulations and other disclosure matters that, again, first selectman, deputy first selectman, director of finance would take care of. Section 5 provides the first selectman is authorized to enter into contracts for the project, which is really probably nothing unusual in general under your charter and under statutory law. And the first selectman, deputy first selectman, and director of finance are authorized to take other actions to issue the bonds and notes, and the resolution shall not become effective until it's approved that an election is provided in section 1204 of the charter. The final 2 pages are the warning of the meeting, and what we try to do for warnings is we try and summarize that long, detailed bond resolution in as few words as possible, because you pay by the word, because this has to go in the paper. And so we summarize it down to where the town meeting is going to be, the time, the place. The item number 1 is to discuss a resolution. So there's no action on the resolution. It can't be amended. It can't be voted down, because the selectmen are removing any vote to the vote on November 8th as part of the ballot. So item A is, item number 1A is to appropriate the $10 million for the projects. Again, we summarize what the projects are. B is to finance the projects with bonds. C is to take applicable internal revenue service regulations and ensure we comply with that. And D is to authorize the different elected and appointed officials to take care of getting the bonds issued and getting the project complete. Down at the bottom of that page, following discussion of the resolution, the moderator shall adjourn the special town meeting to its conclusion and send the vote to the ballot on Tuesday, November 8th, in accordance with the election.
The question, who would be the moderator?
However your town meetings operate under your charter.
We usually elect someone.
Yeah, it's usually elected, yeah. For most towns to do it, they elect the moderator. We
Have
restate.
you been a moderator?
Never. Always wanted to be when I grew up.
We restate the question. The question that will go on the ballot is on here. And again, this is this will be signed by the first select woman on behalf of the Board of Selectmen for putting it into the paper. So all those pages are encompassed in the first two pages, which approve the warning of the town meeting, sending it to referendum, approving the question, which is what needs to be done and filed by the Secretary of State's office either tomorrow or within a short time frame. But we have to actually approve it no later than tomorrow. That's why we're here tonight. And authorize the explanatory text to be prepared and sent out to voters as you feel appropriate. That's the resolution.
So we are going to entertain a motion, Bruce, on the resolution to call the special town meeting and referendum vote at this point?
So moved.
Moved by Brian. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Fred.
I have one question.
Yeah, I'll second.
Seconded by Fred. Question from Ben.
The phrase roadside elements, what is that?
That if there were storm drains, those types of things next to the road that are important portions of the road that you would want to replace if you're tearing up the road, primarily storm drains and those types of improvements next to the road.
And I guess my next question, say we had a water main break on Brownstone Avenue and we chose to just repair a 30-foot section of the road, could we then use this money for something like that if there was a large?
Well, the resolution actually provides for water, infrastructure improvements, yes.
Correct, but
Right.
would we be in any violation if we then picked the road based on the need at that point? I just want to make sure, Susan knows where I'm going with this, which I'm okay with it, I just want to make sure we're finding something like that.
I think that's.
Bring it back.
Yeah, again.
And then it'd have to be properly bid, and the bonding would have to be set up properly, all that, but.
Okay, again, the roads and sidewalks come back to this board for approval of what gets done.
That was all I had.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
We don't make that decision at the administrative level, it's made at this legislative. Okay, so there's been a motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. And the other resolution is presented at the town meeting, but not voted on.
Correct.
And the moderator so deems it to go to.
I think
And
you'll be.
you're typically at that.
Yeah, well, yes, we'll be there. At that meeting, I would recommend that there be some sort of presentation, brief presentation on the projects, so people would get more information before they vote on November 8th.
Okay.
And then it's just entertaining questions on the projects, and then the meeting's adjourned to the vote.
To the vote.
Yep.
And how many days notice referendums? We don't,
You check with the town clerk, I think it's 30
okay.
in most
Get
instances,
this
but,
out.
yeah, there really probably isn't any reason to wait on
Nope, get
publishing.
this out too. Okay.
Right.
Any other questions for Bruce or David or Tom at this point, or the committee? I heard a voice. Was it your voice? I'm sorry? No, okay, I wasn't sure. Sean, did you have a question?
Just so, we're obviously, the Parks and Rec, we're trying to promote the park, but I technically cannot do that, am I correct? From what you're saying?
Right, well, you can't spend town funds to do that.
This is a town employee.
Right, and that's what, exactly. So you have to be very careful about that. You can do whatever you want on your own time, but technically, if you were on you're on town time as part of your employment, if you were promoting the project, someone could make a claim that because you're getting paid for that time, you're spending town funds in order to promote the project. So you have to be very careful about that in the context of being a town employee.
Tell them to call
Right.
Ralph.
Right, so.
Ralph will
ahead.
make himself available.
Jessica, you're on the committee.
We were considering that the next phase of our committee would be to start promoting it at like Portland Fair, at Family Day and whatnot, so does that mean that now we cannot do that?
You can do it in a capacity of a, what is it called?
As an individual.
As an individual.
And then,
Your own money.
if you have a group of people that wants to promote it, you can do that, but you have to file forms with the State Election Enforcement Commission. Basically, it's like running an election. You have to form a political action committee and file forms, and if you're going to raise money and spend money, if it's over $1,000, you have to file those forms, and then you can go out and promote it as much as you want. Okay, that's what individuals can do. There are still some free speech rights to do that, but you have to, in order to promote any piece of it, make sure you check the State Election Enforcement Commission website. There's a pretty good manual in there, what you can and cannot do, and how you go about filing those forms and making sure that you're in compliance.
Yeah, I don't think,
Okay.
the big thing we're gonna be doing, like at the fair, is just to be a booth to speak to and be informational in nature. So I don't see us raising, the only thing we talked
Mhm.
about was signs. I guess we'll just have to pony up and put it in individually to put signs, but we're just speaking to give.
Sure,
information.
that's fine. If it
You just have to be careful.
Yeah,
And it sounds like a lot of big words, but it can be done. State Elections Enforcement doesn't make it too terribly difficult, and as Bruce said, there's information on their website, Town Clerk's Office, but it'd also be a resource to assist you. And it's always better safe than sorry in terms of how you do this.
Right.
If it's a collection of people spending money, then it's a political action committee. If it's an individual, if I'm repeating what you said, Bruce, it's your individual monies.
Right.
But if 2 or 3 people are putting money together, then you become a committee. And
Right.
people have a right to know that there's a committee and who they are, and
They
how
have
much
right to
money
know
they spend.
where the money is coming from,
Okay.
who's donating to you, and how you're
Donors,
spending it.
yeah.
It's like, again, it's a political action committee. But you're right, as an individual, you could do whatever you want, spend whatever you want, because there's still free speech. So if you want to
Even though
get,
it's been appointed by the town to the steering committee.
well, that's where it gets very tricky, because are you, in the capacity of being your individuals, or are you members of the committee? Read the pamphlet and see whether there may be some information about that in there, just to be careful, so. No, it's
For
a,
example, the committee's gonna come and talk at an educational at the end of September,
mhm,
for a group that I work with.
mhm,
It's being sponsored by the quorum, which is not strictly a town entity, we're a 501c3.
mhm.
There's no money exchanging hands. I assume that if they're going to present it, that's fine, because there's no money being.
And you're not spending any money at all, you're just going to present information.
Right, no money being-
That would probably be okay. Yep, yep.
Bruce, previously, they had produced this brochure,
Mhm.
and if it were to be reproduced, there's a cost to this, so it would have to be,
Yeah, and all these rules kick into gear effective now.
Because
Up
of our
until when this question is set, you could do whatever you want and promote whatever you want. That's fine, but once the question is set, the town has limits, and individuals collectively getting together to try and oppose or promote referendum questions have limits on what they can do. So just check the website to make sure that you're okay.
Can you repeat that website or the pamphlet?
Go to ct.gov, and on there, if you scroll through the menus, you should find departments and agencies of the state of Connecticut. Go to the State Election Enforcement Commission. Okay?
I'll get you in a minute, Joe. Tom?
The town produces the items that they're allowed to produce,
Mhm.
going one way or the other. They can then share them with that committee.
Mhm.
So then they've already have vetted items from our attorney. They
Mhm.
don't get them in trouble.
You could do that.
And the documents and full flyers you have to share.
Mhm.
I guess the selectmen's office together, I think they're all vetted through
Mhm.
bond council. So that would be, we'd have to come up with some general fund money that we can spend on that. And then I guess that would be things that you'd have with you to pass out.
But they're not going to be promoting or not promoting. They're
Yeah,
flat,
it'll be very-
informational.
Informational.
I said to you yesterday, everyone, I said yesterday, is essentially what I will do a number of times from now on until the election. So I don't, I was just giving facts, and then, so I'm hoping that.
That's probably okay, yep. Mhm. Okay, yeah, it's
Any
a
other
tricky
questions? Joe, did
area.
you have a question?
I think I'm right. It just sounds like as a committee, we're going to be very limited.
Yes.
And have to be very careful.
I don't know that we should disband the committee.
That's what I was going to say, it almost feels like
Right.
our job
I
now.
think, I think we'd be better off, because
We
then
might be
you
able
wouldn't
to
be on a
disband,
committee.
we have a committee that
Right,
we had
we disband.
established to do some of the work associated with what you saw last night and a lot of the other work. We can disband that committee at this point. Their work is done because it's gone now to the question. We have the question, your work is completed. I don't know whether you'd recommend we disband that committee.
It
Take a
would
vote.
probably make it cleaner if you want to.
I like that,
I'll
because I
put
don't
that
want it to become
on
a headache.
the agenda for the
somebody
next
just-
regularly scheduled meeting, which is September 21.
Yeah.
I think that's much
As long
cleaner
as
and
they
gives
know
them some
between
more
now and then.
protection.
It will offer you some protection.
Right.
So we will meet as individuals.
Yeah.
But just be very careful, because there have been complaints filed against individuals that promote things and don't file the necessary forms. I mean, people, you can see where this can go.
Ultimately, the situation we're in is, we had a list of things we thought we had to do, but it all depended on, obviously, a successful vote tonight. So we really need just one more meeting to sum up of, okay, who's going to do what. That's ultimately what we have to do in one more meeting. So that's what we're having next week. So obviously, we're going to have to be a little more conscientious of doing.
Right, yes.
Ellen?
This is a test to see if I can still process much information. Am I correct in saying that the question on the ballot will make reference only to $1 figure, and that's 10 million?
Correct. Because the question really is a summation of the detailed bond resolution that breaks that. Right. It's, right. Otherwise, the question would be too long to fit on a ballot, so, yep.
So how does the Parks Recreation Commission fall into this? Is they have to follow all the rules too, even though they're kind of like my governing body, and that they're promoting, but they can't promote the park.
They should be working through the Selectmen and explanatory text process now as town officials, as elected or appointed town officials, yep. Okay.
And the website can have the explanatory information. We can put that on there.
The presentation's on it right now. Would that be?
That's okay. That's stuff that was in the public domain prior to when the question was set. I think that can stay on there at this point in time, but then
Anything new.
Right. Anything new has to be vetted.
And if you have any questions, Bruce will help us answer them.
Yep.
So feel free to get to me or Tom. Same for the select. Any other questions from the committee? At this point? Okay. I want to thank everyone involved, especially our guests who are here tonight. You've been very helpful to us, as well as all our employees and committee members and selectmen and members of the public, and all those who submitted testimony. As I learned quite a bit last night at the public hearing. I thought it went very, very well, and I think the selectmen appreciate all the input from the professionals as well as those that were on the committee and who participate as citizens. So thank you very, very much. Are there any appointments to boards and commissions? Refunds of excess payments, number 11.
$109.63 to Ford Credit Personal Property Tax.
Seconded by Kathy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
$32.17 to Lynn D. Johnson.
Seconded by Kathy. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
$55.47 to Nicholas J. Orgazalik.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
$11.38 to Maureen L. Bradshaw.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
$55.21 to Tara A. Libera.
Seconded by Kathy. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
$36.15 to Robert A. Williams Jr.
Seconded by Kathy. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
$32.90 to Patricia A. Curcio.
Seconded by Kathy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
$14.10 to Alyssa M. Phillips.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Did we ever learn why it said personal property tax on the floor? On the first one?
I thought, was there an email sent out to you on that? I thought that Michelle had sent something, but she did look up what it said on the actual paper from the tax collector's office, and that is exactly how it was written, so that's what we put on there.
On a vehicle.
It's a vehicle? It's not a vehicle? I don't know. That's
No.
what it said. I did look at the paper.
Right, if it's a vehicle, it shouldn't. Okay. Whatever. As long as everybody's happy with it.
She did look, I know she specifically looked it up, and I had hoped she'd sent something out, but it was.
She
There's an awful lot of
No,
emails that
I
you
think
get,
she,
I know, I
I
apologize.
do believe
but-
she did, but I think I
Thought
was
she
just as
did,
confused
then.
afterwards as.
I think she probably said that's the way it's
I think that
recorded.
was, yeah, but that doesn't make it right, but okay. But either way.
Status reports, I have nothing. Public comment? Any public comment tonight? Informal discussion from the selectmen.
I just have one thing which is related to I wanted to share with you.
Sure.
I came across the 1966
It's a very good year.
book. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's got a lot of great information
Yes,
in it.
yes, I have seen it, yeah.
It was interesting that what is now Portland on this state, which now is what, if we added the 1666, that John Savage was appointed pounder for the east side of the river to keep cattle or creatures off improved land. So if there's a paying job, Susan, I'd be interested in something like that.
I will assign it to you, Fred, how about that?
But this, by the way, if you haven't seen it, it's a great book.
Is that by Dan Bynum?
Yeah, this
Dan
is-
Bynum
yeah,
like that?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of information. As a matter of fact, Selectman Pelton's last name, I don't know if you're related to all the Peltons at that time, but there must be,
Only if they're famous and rich.
I was going to say, quite a heritage here.
Any moderators back then?
I think they're.
Let it go, Mike, let it go.
Seriously, we do need moderators at our town meetings. And so if you would like to have some instructions, we're happy to give them to you, because it is
So
an
moved.
honor.
Susan, did you get a phone call on that Fisher cat?
I got, I was told it was Bobcat, and yes,
Bobcat,
we did,
yeah.
yeah.
I pulled over, it was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Oh,
It was-
yeah.
It was only about that big, it
I
was,
think Animal Control picked it up.
yeah, but it was a beautiful,
Really?
beautiful cat.
Street, there was a
I heard about that,
last
yeah.
week, yeah.
It got picked up.
I didn't see it.
Oh, this one got hit hard, but it was,
Was it a baby?
It was beautiful.
I
Oh,
think so. It was only about that big. It was
Yeah.
beautiful, it was beautiful color,
It did get
beautiful,
a
yeah.
call.
Where was he?
Right on Route 17, right before Apple Tree Lane.
Yeah, yeah, we got a call.
That's a shame.
There was a motion made, is there a second for adjournment?
Oh, second.
Kathy?
Wait, follow-up.
No.
Did we do follow-up items? Don
Okay.
Mitchell dropped off the follow-up items.
Well, I asked him to come on the 21st.
Oh, okay.
I do know that.
All right, so he said,
Yep, maybe that's why Michelle took him off, but
Okay.
he's not dropped.
all right,
And that would be September.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other items under follow-up? I know that Chief Shea wants to come in and talk about the new opioid legislation. He just hasn't identified a date yet on that. So that's the only update I have on that. And there is a motion still you want to make? Kathy, do you want a second adjournment? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you.
Only 9:20.